Springfield's Talk 1041. Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Nick Reed, streaming live, KSGF.com, the app as well. This week is the week that this SAVE Act is supposed to be taken up in the Senate. I'm just highly suspect of all of this. I have this fear that there's going to be an attempt to make it look as if they did what it is that they were asked to do without actually doing that. I have this, there's this conflation going on based off of confusion, which the confusion makes sense. You know, does it take 60 votes? Does it take a simple majority? I don't understand. What's the difference between the two? And what I think is I fear there's not going to be a genuine attempt to go about this in a way that utilizes the actual real filibuster, and it instead will be essentially presented as we did what we could and see the votes weren't there, and I'll explain how I think that's going to play out. But I wanted to, here in just a bit, play, a bit of audio, Senator Mike Lee explaining that, there's disinformation out there. There's got to be a rule change. Oh, you have to change. There are headlines all over the place, and I'm going to read to you a piece in the Federalist on this same issue, noting all of the disinformation that is out there, claiming that in order for what's now being called the talking filibuster, which is actually a filibuster, that there has to be a rule change in order for that to occur. And that repeatedly is being explained by many as absolutely not true. It is not necessary for there to be a rule change. And, the best way that I've managed to reduce it down here in an understandable way is a simple majority is needed in the Senate for any legislation in order to forcibly stop debate on an issue. You have to have 60 votes. So a lot of times that's why there's a hang-up to get legislation passed, because they can't get the 60 votes to allow it to come to a vote in the first place. And so at the filibuster, the idea behind the filibuster is that everybody just wears down so that there isn't a need to force a vote. You hear the term cloture. Cloture means, all right, we've had enough of this. We're going to stop the debate. We're stopping it. We don't care if everyone's done or not. We've spent enough time on this. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to vote for cloture. And that's where the 60 votes is needed in order to stop the debate. And then you have the vote that requires just the simple majority. Well, the other option, and this is the actual filibuster, is everyone gets so tired and exhausted, no one fights the end of debate. Everyone's like, okay, we're done. And so you don't have to vote for cloture to force the end of debate, because everyone's tired of doing it, and they all agree, okay, this is fine, let's just go ahead and vote on this thing. Essentially run out of steam on it. And that's where the difference is. In terms of this confusion and the need for 60 versus the need for 50. And I think that Thune and some of the establishment Republicans, what I fear is they're going to play off of that confusion in order to try and make it look like they did what was being requested of them, and it just didn't work, while not actually doing that. So we'll get into that just a little bit. Latest also with Iran. One of the big reports coming out yesterday was the intelligence briefing that the new leader of Iran's actually a homosexual, and and the Trump's reaction to that, just given the perfect scenario of how it is that the regime treats the LGBT community, and then if that were the case, how that could be potentially problematic. And according to intelligence, this is part of the reason his dad wasn't too keen on him ascending to leadership once his absence came about, which of course it has with the war in Iran, and some other developments also going on there. The Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447-KSGF. We'll get that weather in a moment. Nicer today than yesterday. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First, meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see widespread frost before 9 a.m., otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 48. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 40. For your Wednesday, sunny skies with a high near 68. And taking a look at Thursday, sunny with a high near 79.
Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. Chad noting that our family had the pleasure of working with Emily Johnson, top-notch realtor in Springfield. We could not have asked for a better experience or expertise, professionalism, unwavering dedication. Truly did set her apart. She listened closely to our needs, was patient with us during our extended home search, provided invaluable insights into not just Springfield, but Nix, Ozark, Stratford, Willard, Republic real estate markets, helping us make informed decisions every step of the way. Emily even helped us coordinate renovations, connecting us with excellent local contractors, making sure our new home was exactly how we envisioned it. Her strong negotiating skills saved us significant money, making the process seamless from beginning to end. We highly recommend Emily Johnson to anyone needing an exceptional realtor in Springfield, and as do I, whether you're looking to buy or sell. That's the consistent sort of feedback people provide regarding their experience with Emily Johnson and House Theory Realty. And I invite you to definitely read reviews, check them out, and reach out to some of those people, especially if it's like a Facebook posting or someone that you can message and ask them any more detailed questions, or ask them that. Now, is this really how you feel? Because, hey, people are suspicious, right? You know, that oftentimes, people are incentivized to make postings, or maybe they're not even real. But with Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, you're going to find that they are. And so I recommend that you reach out to them as well. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. There's a lot of confusion regarding exactly what it is going to take in order to get to a vote in the Senate, the SAVE Act, with a requirement of only a majority of vote as opposed to 60. I believe some of this is deliberate. I believe that some within the establishment Republican Party, people like Thune, don't want this to be a thing, and so they are utilizing the lack of knowledge amongst the American population regarding Senate procedures in order to try and make this thing go away. And they have an assist with the media, because the media does not want our elections to be any more secure. So they certainly don't have to worry about the media pointing out the the realities of what it would take versus what it doesn't take, and clearing up any of that confusion. It's a rare instance in which some Republicans, though they are establishment, find an allyship in disinformation with the mainstream media. And this isn't nearly as complicated as it might seem. And again, I think that it's being made to seem more complicated so that people shut down and just write it off as, well, I don't understand, these are very complicated rules. I want to start off Senator Mike Lee, who has been very vocal in the simplicity of this and trying to clear up the misinformation, was on with Laura Ingraham last night on this issue, and I want to start off with his comments regarding this.
So, again, he doesn't have the votes. He doesn't have 60 votes. What do you need to change the rule here and enforce the talking filibuster? Do you need to change the rule?
No rule change is required. No rule change whatsoever is required. And I cannot emphasize this enough, Laura. This is entirely within the Senate rules. In fact, this has been something that has been part of the Senate's culture since 1789, since the moment the Senate was created and it sprang into existence. This is something that we can do without changing a single rule or a single precedent. And it's something that we must do in this instance. Look, the zombie filibuster, as I refer to it, is the filibuster that we allow, that allows people to have the benefits of the filibuster without doing anything. They can be asleep, they can be at a bar, they can be on some Caribbean island drinking drinks with umbrellas in them. But that is not a procedure that we ought to allow here. Not on this bill, not where the fate of the republic is on the line, not where the will and wish of 85% of the American people are aligned with this. We've got to do it. Now, as of last week, I don't doubt that he had doubts about his support for the talking filibuster. It's still not too late. We can still do it, and we must do it.
Brianna Lyman has a piece on this in the Federalist I wanted to share with you because I think it does a great job of really reducing this down to the basics, and it's not really as complicated as they want it to be. And she's an election correspondent at the Federalist. She notes that the Senate is set to bring the Save America Act to the floor this week, and the impending action has prompted corporate media to deploy deceptive talking points about upper chamber rules. The election integrity measure, whose key components on voter ID and proof of citizenship are widely popular with Republican, Independent, and Democrat voters, and it has faced a headwind of false narratives since its introduction. Now, some members of the propaganda press are misleading readers about what it would take to pass the legislation, with several outlets framing the issue as though Republicans would need to, quote, change Senate rules in order to pass the bill with a simple majority, which, again, that's the premise of Laura Ingraham's question there, like what needs to change or does it at all, to which Mike Lee said no. The Washington Post claimed the legislation, quote, faces unified opposition from Democrats, meaning the Senate can't pass it unless Republicans change the rules and eliminate the filibuster. NBC News reported that years ago, Senator Jeff Merkley, a Democrat from Oregon, explored the possibility of using a talking filibuster when Democrats were in charge of the Senate and frustrated by relentless Republican filibusters. He eventually concluded it wasn't feasible to get around the 60-vote threshold without changing the Senate rules. But Rachel Bovard, vice president of programs at Conservative Partnership Institute, told the Federalist that the portrayal fundamentally misunderstands how Senate procedure works. Quote, so everything in the Senate prior to cloture being filed on it is a simple majority. What a filibuster is you're forcing them to actually come physically delay the vote. At that point, she explained, there are two ways to end that delay. One option is filing this term you hear all the time, cloture, which requires 60 votes under Senate Rule 22 to cut off debate. So it's essentially saying everyone has to quit talking now. If we get 60 senators to say, everyone, we're going to vote on this, even if you're standing in line, you still have something to say. If we get 60 votes, then boom, it's done. Too bad, so sad. Talk time is over. The other path is to force senators of the minority to hold the floor continuously and keep talking. That is what is known as a talking filibuster. Bovard explained, I think a lot of reporters and a lot of Americans think bills pass at 60 votes. Every bill passes the Senate with a simple majority. It's just a question of how you break the filibuster. You can either do it mechanically under Senate Rule 22 by invoking cloture with the needed 60 votes, or you can break a filibuster by physical exhaustion, being the talking filibuster. Either way, bills always pass a simple majority once the filibuster has been broken. It is the same point that's made by Representative Chip Roy in an exclusive letter obtained by the Federalist. Roy explained that so long as all Senate Republicans who support the legislation are present, that number being 50, and there is a quorum, the Senate must either be voting or a member must be speaking, a.k.a. the talking filibuster. If Republicans stick together and the minority exhausts their opportunities to speak in opposition or give up, a final vote on passage of the bill occurs automatically at a majority threshold, Roy notes. In other words, the Senate's own existing rules allow for this process, and there is no rule change required. Bovard said a talking filibuster would also force the Senate to do what it is supposed to do best, that is, deliberate and negotiate. Quote, a talking filibuster forces the Senate to start seeing if it can shake loose a deal that 7 Democrats might support. It's about forcing the minority to talk to the majority on a bill where both sides would never engage otherwise. In that scenario, Republicans may be able to get the 60 votes needed for the cloture itself. But the talking filibuster would also give Republicans another way to pass the legislation with only needing the simple majority. Bovard noted one reason for the misconception about changing the rules could be due to Democrats' 2022 effort to use a talking filibuster to pass their election legislation. Then Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer tried to ram through Democrats' so-called Freedom to Vote Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, in a bid to avoid Republicans using the talking filibuster, which under current Senate rules would in part permit each senator to speak on 2 separate times for as long as they can physically do so, to prolong or delay the vote. Schumer suggested changing the rules that would limit each senator to 2 speeches on the final passage of the legislation while stopping other tactics like adding amendments, motions, or points of order, which would give senators additional speaking time. Bovard said because of Schumer's effort to actually change filibuster rules to make it easier for Democrats at the time, there are a lot of people who say, well, because Democrats tried to propose a rule change to do this, then a rule change must be required now. But that's not true at all. A talking filibuster has always been part of the Senate's architecture since the Senate inception. In 2022, Democrats realized how physically and procedurally difficult it would be and tried to change the rules to make it easier on themselves. But Republicans are not proposing that now. They're just proposing using the procedure as the institution currently allows. Heart of the big obstacle here is much more simple and much more just human characteristic than oftentimes we tell ourselves. And it's just a lot of these folks, they don't want to go through it. They don't want to be in a talking contest against one another because it's long. And if you are on the losing side of it, you have to face your constituents. And you're talking not just hours, but potentially days here, in which you're going to have that number of, for a quorum to exist, you have to have so many, individuals there. You've got to make sure that you've got all of the Republicans there. And listen, I acknowledge that's not easy. That's part of the reason they don't want to do this. And it's part of the reason they haven't done the real filibuster in a very, very, very long time, because they got tired of having to do that. It was just too much of a hassle. It's also part of the reason they talked about just, quote, doing away with the filibuster for a period of time, because they would rather just do away with it than be forced to actually carry it out. Some of them are, the term has been used lazy. But even if you're not lazy, I'm not going to pretend as if this isn't a daunting task to take on. To make sure that you wrangle everyone together and that everyone participates in this, and it's sort of a game of chicken, but in reverse, I suppose, to some degree. Instead of approaching one another very quickly and who's going to jump out of the way at the last minute, it's like just who can outlast the other. It almost makes me think of those contests that used to be done. Well, heck, we did one at one of the radio stations I worked at where people would register to win a car, and then all the finalists, they had to put their hand on a car, and whomever it was that was the last person standing through all the exhaustion won the car. You have people collapsing, you have people fainting, you got to have medics on site in order to make sure nobody has any serious medical issues because of what some people will push themselves through. And some of these people are old. A lot of these people are old. And I think the younger some of them are, the less likely they are to have potentially the same level of work ethic that 40 or 50 years ago a senator their same age may have had, where hell or high water, I'm principled on this thing and I'm going to stand by it if I have to stand here for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. One of the real driving forces against this is I think so many of them just don't want to do it. They do note, and this is accurate, that, and this is part of the reason they've done away with the actual real filibuster, is because when this is going on, you can't get other things done, like funding for TSA, for example. The pretend or zombie filibuster, as it's been referenced, allows them to do the little pretend filibuster, and then we just go about our day and we vote on other things, and we can go ahead and get the work of the people done in the meantime. But if you're doing an actual filibuster, it prevents you from doing that. Now, in the minds of some people, depending what's on the slate, that ain't a bad thing. Have government not passing more laws. It does become a little stickier, however, when you are trying, Democrats have numerous occasions now voted against funding TSA and Homeland Security, and they continue to do so. And this is something that, particularly as people are going on spring break and they're going to the airports, and it's just viral. The videos have been going with the hassle, and legitimately at this point, you can point to Democrats, say it's their fault. Now, the tide could turn against Republicans if they're doing a filibuster, and Democrats could say, hey, we aren't even allowed to debate this Homeland Security thing because of the ongoing filibuster. But then Republicans can, it can go back and forth. This is just the nature of the game. There's one thing about this that I just would be interested to see, and I don't know how this is going to play out. I don't know what the plan here is. My instinct tells me that they'll go on for a while and then at some point decide to vote for cloture, won't get the 60 votes, and then Thune will say, see, we just don't have the numbers. We tried, but it didn't work, which actually means they gave up and Democrats won. Because that would mean Democrats outlasted Republicans. In the event that this does actually go forward in the true sense of a filibuster until Democrats get so absolutely exhausted they can no longer continue it, and then only 51 votes is needed in order to get it, or a simple majority is needed to get it to pass, I am curious how long that will be, because in an effort to make the idea sound less appealing, they keep presenting this as it can go on for weeks or months even. I mean, it could go, I saw one article and it did the math. It was an editorial on if every senator used up all of his or her time and then added the amendments and then debated on that, then it would go on past the next presidential election. It would be this many days. It would, now obviously that isn't going to happen. I do wonder how long and who would hold out the longest. Would the Democrats really have a more principled um uh, just gut about the whole thing and stick with it no matter what, or would Republicans? I'd be interested to know how long Democrats can go. In all honesty, could they drag this thing out for weeks, or would we be a day and a half into it and they're like, you know what, this actually isn't worth it? I kind of want to know the answer to that, aside from, of course, the need to get the SAVE Act implemented. I suppose this week, as things kick off, we may have some sense of the direction that this is headed. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. I had Mexican Villa tacos last night.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I
Did you
did.
just get the original crunchy ones?
Yep, I did.
There you go.
I'm a
You're a
classic
simple
kind of guy.
man.
So I did get half steak, though.
Ooh, I bet those were good.
Yeah, it's funny because when I order to, because I was in town around dinner, and so I called my wife, and we decided I'd go by Mexican Villa and pick it up, and I was thinking if they had to guess as I'm picking up something for my wife and then for me, they'd probably get the orders mixed up. Think, oh, look at the little tacos for the lady. Meanwhile, she had 3 enchiladas and a chimichanga.
Good for her.
Now, when I say that, and some of you who don't know are maybe trying to visualize what this woman looks like, she almost always will order like 2 or 3 meals at a time whenever we get something like Mexican Villa. So she did not eat all of that in one setting, nor could she.
Yeah, I don't think she could.
I just felt like, should she get wind that I was talking about this, she would be pleased to know that I did specify that that is not one meal for her.
Yes. I think
Okay.
that she would appreciate that. The first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see widespread frost before 9 a.m., otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 48. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 40. For your Wednesday, sunny skies with a high near 68. And for Thursday, sunny with a high near 79.
Couple of your messages on the Pyramid Roofing Company text line regarding the filibuster and the 60-vote cloture situation. So for all these years, people like Roy Blunt have been lying to us about the 60 votes. Well, I suppose one can characterize it how one wants. But I do believe that when you are in that world, that is your daily world, and you recognize that to stop debate in order to vote on something, you need 60 votes in your mind. I can see how the natural conversation of, well, we just didn't have the votes regarding legislation can become just the normal way of speaking about these things. So and if you missed earlier, what happens is, in order to force a stop to debate on all legislation that goes through the Senate just needs a simple majority. And there is this misunderstanding that what is needed is 60 votes. The 60 votes is what's needed in order to stop the debate, to make it quit. And that is what Democrats have, whomever's in the minority has been relying on. And so in the minds of lawmakers, oftentimes you don't simply need a majority of votes. You have to have 60 votes, because you have to have 60 votes in order to vote on the legislation that needs a majority. It's like step 1, step 2. That's where the filibuster, the actual filibuster, comes in which they're, instead of saying, no, we aren't going to give you the votes for cloture, all right, well, we'll just keep debating this. We will not table this thing. We're not going to stop. And at some point, no one is willing to get up and talk anymore, and then you can vote on it. You don't have to vote on cloture because the debate stopped itself. And so that's how all this plays out. Now, that doesn't mean that lawmakers haven't at times hidden behind the 60-vote threshold as a way to perhaps make the uninformed citizen believe that the votes aren't there for the legislation itself. But I do believe they have become so accustomed to this shortcut way of getting around actually having to do a filibuster that 60-vote threshold is just kind of a normal threshold in their minds. One of the other questions coming in, can't they just get rid of the filibuster? Well, and that's what's been talked about as well. The problem with that is when you no longer are in power, and then you have absolutely no power whatsoever to stop anything. I'm just a traditionalist on this thing. I like the idea of the minority party having the ability to prevent something from going through, but it being so difficult that it takes a massive amount of dedication that isn't going to be utilized all the time. It's got to be a combination of things. Just particularly in this day and age where you got a lot of party line stuff. Now, of course, Fetterman, oftentimes he does side with Republicans, but then you get the Collins and the Murkowskis that will side with Democrats at times, but largely things are right down the party line vote. And if that's the case, if you have particularly Democrats are always going to vote lockstep, then when you're in the minority, if Republicans are in the minority, what's the point in even showing up? You have absolutely no power whatsoever to do anything. But I also believe you're in the minority, so you shouldn't have the same level of power the majority does, and hence the filibuster. But it shouldn't be easy. It should be very, very difficult. It should be the sort of thing that only gets utilized in very rare instances. And that's why to me, it's a great fit. It works out nicely when it's utilized the way that it's supposed to be used. Oh, but it's so hard. Yeah, it should be. Should be very, very hard. 100%. Okay. So that is supposed to come up in the Senate this week. Now, here's a heartwarming story from the left. Anti-ICE agitators blow cover in Boston, allowing a child rape suspect to evade arrest for 2 weeks. I wonder how many additional children he got to rape in that time because of these compassionate left-wingers that are going around obstructing justice. See, this is the reality of what these people do. When you have ICE in these neighborhoods, it is because they are searching for dangerous criminals. Yes, at times, others that are in this country illegally might get swept up in that, even though they aren't dangerous criminals. But when they're out there searching, this is what we saw in Minneapolis because of the refusal to detain individuals that had been taken to jail for other crimes that were in this country illegally. Like they do here, you know why we don't have these problems for all of you anti-ICE people that get together at the library and, we're going to really make sure that we keep ICE from doing what they're doing in Minnesota. They're not doing what they're doing in Minnesota. Because Greene County, in particular, does not refuse to turn these criminals over to the feds. When somebody who's in this country illegally gets arrested for beating his wife to a pulp, and there's a detainer on them, you have two ways of doing things. You have the way that we do it here, in which we let ICE know, hey, we got this guy. And he's going to be set to be released on this day, so do you want to come get him? Yeah, we'll come get him. Boom. In sanctuary cities, they say, no, we're not going to hold him for you, and then they release him back out into the streets, which means that's where ICE has to go to get them. This is why they get in these neighborhoods. It's why we don't have the problem here that you have in sanctuary cities. By the way, you know why things de-escalated in Minnesota? Because the agreement was to stop behaving as a sanctuary city, to stop releasing the criminals into the neighborhoods, which meant ICE and Border Patrol did not have to go into the neighborhoods any longer. They could just go pick them up at the jail. So when you target and come up with these plans to blow whistles and to alert neighborhoods that ICE is in the neighborhood, in all likelihood, you are protecting a criminal, someone who is victimized, in all likelihood, children or women, and more often than not, people who are of minority status. This is one such example. An illegal immigrant from El Salvador, wanted for child rape and living near his school, was arrested last week, a month after anti-ICE agitators blew an operation conducted by federal authorities to capture him. Video footage taken by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, on February 12th in Boston, a sanctuary city, showed left-wing activists shouting obscenities to an agent recording them from inside a vehicle. At the time, ICE was attempting to take into custody Walter Roberto Videz Ortiz, who is wanted in his native El Salvador for raping a child. The agents were at his home in East Boston while in their vehicles or outside his home. They were waiting for him to come out when they were quickly surrounded by activists who blew whistles, cursed at them, and said that the ICE agents were the ones traumatizing children, not the child rapist, at a nearby elementary school down the street. One agitator telling the agents that they were criminals. Their cover was blown. They tipped off the child rapist and he escaped. Fortunately, they were able to track him down weeks later, March 12th. This is an individual who entered the country illegally through Texas in 2016. The same year, El Salvador issued an arrest warrant for him. Incidentally, you remember when Donald Trump was falsely accused of saying all Mexicans are murderers and rapists? This is the sort of person he was talking about. These individuals that when there's an arrest warrant in their native country for something like child rape, they just would run to the United States and find themselves a nice little sanctuary city. These are the people that the left-wing agitators are protecting. And they may tell themselves, well, no, that's not who we're, but that is. And by the way, right now, one of the things he was living next to a school. One of the big problems that the Democrats have and what they want to stop is ICE and Border Patrol from being able to capture these people in certain parameters around schools. Create these safe zones where these child rapists can hide out knowing that they can't be captured. That's currently part of the reason that if you are going to the airport, you have to wait 5 hours because they are holding up that funding, making a number of demands. One is that ICE can't be at voting booths, wonder why that is, and that they can't be near certain facilities. One of them is elementary schools. So they are demanding legislation creating safe spaces for violent criminals in hospitals, in elementary schools, in the voting booths. They are not helping good people. They are helping the worst of the worst. And that may not be what they're intending. They may be useful idiots, but that's the reality. Well, I wasn't sure how, but now I know. Nancy Guthrie. How would this be Donald Trump's fault? On The View, I believe it was last week, if not the week prior, Whoopi Goldberg claimed that the action in Iran, at least in part, was to distract from Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Why, you may ask? Who knows? Because Donald Trump's just a bad guy. This story from the Daily Express. Nancy Guthrie was a victim of targeted personal grievance as political views uncovered. Writing, Nancy Guthrie could have been the victim of a targeted personal grievance, according to a top death investigator. The investigation into Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, now entering its 7th week, with no one having yet been arrested in connection with her kidnapping. However, it's been revealed recently that Nancy had previous concerns about being hacked on social media. Well, what old person doesn't, let's be honest. As she claimed her Facebook Messenger had been accessed by an unknown person twice. This comes after a mystery man claimed he saw Nancy 5 days ago. More recently, though, a top death investigator has shared her thoughts on why Nancy could have been taken. Following the announcement that Nancy may have been hacked, Dr. Laura Petler, the founder and CEO of Laura Petler and Associates, a multidisciplinary death investigation firm, investigated Nancy's social media. Petler spoke exclusively to the Express US about her findings and her thoughts on why Nancy was taken in the dead of the night, February 1st. Petler shared that she and her team had concerns about what she was posting, with Nancy's social media being full of political messages and anti-Trump rhetoric. Oh, well, clearly, Trump supporters got her. The 84-year-old often reshared reels that condemned Donald Trump and ICE and Vladimir Putin, cementing her stance as a hardcore MAGA critic. Petler told the outlet, quote, "I've seen a lot about how social media is a reflection of the personality, emotionally, cognitive behavior of a person in relation to their environment, their societal norms, and their culture." Continuing, the death investigator added, "We looked at her socials within 48 hours of her being gone. I said to my team that I had concerns about what she was posting. If she posted it publicly, how does that translate to conversations she might have had in the world? This has looked like a targeted personal grievance for a day one, but without knowing all the info they know, we can only surmise." And, I mean, what a responsible thing to surmise. So, she posted, as a white liberal woman, posted anti-Trump stuff, anti-MAGA stuff, and so clearly that means that her kidnapping and disappearance is MAGA-related. Of course, no evidence of this whatsoever. Zero. Zip. As fully acknowledged by this so-called investigator. But she did post anti-MAGA stuff, so it does have to make you really wonder if once again Donald Trump and his Nazis' hands are all over the mystery disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. reading from this article in the Daily Express, quoting a investigative quote expert on deaths, and expressing her concern that Nancy Guthrie, who's been disappeared for a couple months now, had posted anti-MAGA stuff on social media 48 hours before she disappeared, and so you can't help but wonder if there's not a connection there. And Sarah had noted off air that if it weren't so sad, it'd be funny. But it is deranged. This is where these people on the left, everything goes to Trump. This is not healthy. When no matter what is occurring in the world, to zero in on this one person, whomever it is in your life, it is an unhealthy obsession that these people have. And it really, truly is straight up an illness. News in 60 seconds. Springfield's Talk 1041. Iran's top security official and the head of the Revolutionary Guard militia were both killed in overnight strikes and new blows to the country's leadership. And one of these individuals in particular was just recently sort of mocking Trump, being like, you better watch it, buddy, because we're going to get you. We apparently got him first. The senior Iranian leader who warned Trump last week to, quote, watch out for yourself, lest you be eliminated, was killed in an overnight strike, according to Israel's foreign minister, Ali Larijani, head of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran, was hit days after joining the president of Iran and foreign minister in the streets of Tehran at the Friday rally marking the pro-Palestinian Quds Day holiday. He told a TV interviewer in reference to Operation Epic Fury, quote, it's clear they're running out of steam. Trump's problem is that he doesn't understand that the Iranian nation is mature and determined. The 67-year-old was one of the 10 Islamic Republic officials with a $10 million bounty placed on his head Friday by the State Department's Rewards for Justice program. In a separate statement, the Israeli Defense Forces announced they had killed General Gholam Reza Soleimani, the head of the Revolutionary Guard's all-volunteer force, in a targeted strike on Tehran, quote, amid the internal protests in Iran, and particularly in recent times with their escalation, the Baji force under Soleimani's command led key suppression operations involving severe violence, widespread arrests, and the use of force against civilian protesters. And there is word that within some of these different military and police divisions that there is dissent and there's breaking of ranks, and in a scenario like this, that means one of two things, or one of three things, I suppose. Either that is happening, which would make sense, or we're just claiming it's happening, which would make sense as well, to kind of create paranoia within those ranks, or it could be a combination of the two things. Then the story that emerged yesterday, Trump was stunned to learn last week that U.S. intelligence indicates the new Iranian supreme leader may be gay, and that his father, the late Ayatollah Khomeini, feared his suitability to rule the Islamic Republic because he's gay. The New York Post reporting Trump couldn't contain his surprise and laughed aloud when he was briefed on the intel, according to sources. Others in the room also found it, quote, hilarious, enjoying the president's reaction, while one senior intelligence official has not stopped laughing about it for days, said one person. I don't know that. I just imagine in my head that there's this one person that just is sitting at his desk or her desk and like, oh, yeah, that gay thing, and just starts chuckling to himself. Whatever it described, they've been laughing about it for days. Like, what are you still, Jim, are you still laughing about that gay thing? Like, oh, yeah. The shocking claim was described to the New York Post by two intelligence community officials and a third person close to the White House. All three sources say the implausible-sounding allegation is viewed as credible by U.S. spy agencies rather than just false information intended to undermine Khomeini, who is 56 and was selected to replace his dead father as supreme leader. Two of the sources said the intelligence indicated that Mojtaba, who earned the nickname the power behind the robes while serving as his aging dad's gatekeeper, had a long-term sexual relationship with his childhood tutor. So a little bit like, I guess, the president of France, but homosexual instead of a heterosexual relationship. The third source said the intelligence indicated the affair was with a person who formerly worked for the family. Mojtaba, who is believed to have been wounded in the same February 28th airstrike that killed his father and other members of his family, has made aggressive sexual overtures to men who care for him, possibly while under the influence of heavy medications. One of the sources said U.S. spy agencies do not have photographic evidence of his alleged sexual attraction to men, but these sources insisted the tip is solid, with one saying it was derived from one of the most protected sources that the government has. The fact that this was elevated to the highest of high levels shows you there is some confidence in this. His purported sexual orientation has been whispered about inside Iran since at least May of 24, after that helicopter crash that killed then-President Ibrahim Raisi. Al-Khamenei's presumed favorite to be the next supreme leader, sources said. Within the U.S. government, it's been a pretty closely held piece of information, one insider said. Trump had previously dismissed the younger Khamenei as a lightweight and an unacceptable choice to run Iran. The new supreme leader is widely considered to be someone who would not bend to U.S. demands to abandon the nuclear and ballistic missile programs that prompted Operation Epic Fury. And some of the new intelligence that is out claims that the reason he survived the bombing was because he took a walk outside during the meeting, that he excused himself and said that, or according to sources, that he said he had to just take a walk outside, and that it was because of that he was not taken out in that bombing now, or that missile strike that killed his father and so many others. Anytime you have a situation like that occur, of course, you're going to have suspicions. Like, well, wasn't that convenient for him? Did he know something was coming? And who knows? Again, when you're dealing with wars like this, oftentimes you have a realistic situation occur. A guy steps out to take a smoke or text his boyfriend, check his Tinder account, whatever it is he's doing. And then sometimes maybe there was a heads up given. Sometimes you just don't know. Trump coming up, disappointed in our oldest ally. And he's really dogged on Britain lately because of their apprehension of being involved in a meaningful way when it comes to the operation targeting Iran. And I do think that there is a little bit of context that might be a little helpful I wanted to share with you coming up on this. The Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447 KSGF.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see widespread frost before 9 a.m., otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 48. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 40. For your Wednesday, sunny skies with a high near 68. And for Thursday, sunny with a high near 79.
That New York Post story about the younger Khomeini who has ascended to a leadership position being homosexual references the fact that he is supposedly an ally to the late President Ahmadinejad, who was really mocked during his reign because in the discussion of LGBTQ rights came up, he just declared that there are no homosexuals in Iran. And that's because homosexuality is illegal in Iran. But do you know how they get around it?
Sex change operations.
Sex change operations,
Yep.
That's right. They force them to get sex change operations as opposed to being executed because then, I guess it doesn't count somehow. It's really funny when you look at the rules for that stuff over here and then the rules, because on one hand, you're like, well, how enlightened. They're on the same page as people on the left are in this country when it comes to sex change operations. But over there, it's to evade being executed as a homosexual, which is a little different than the reason it's done here. So different motivating factors. But in the end, still getting the surgery. Traffic update. I'm Nick Reed. It's terrible. President Trump's disappointment in oldest ally Britain, saying that he feels vindicated in his years of questioning the fidelity of America's Western alliance, because when he did call them to rally around the flag, they refused to answer, saying nations like Britain should have rightfully come with enthusiasm, as he encourages countries whose economies rely on the free flow of global commerce to stand up and take a hand in preserving maritime security. Now, there's a number of reasons that may feed into this apprehension of the British to get too involved. And a number of you texting on the Pyramid Roofing Company text line note the increased Muslim population that Britain has and the fear of offending the Muslim population. And it is clear that many of those in British government have definitely taken a knee to the Islamic populations in their country, and we've seen it in horrific ways with the rape scandals in which they just have swept the massive, over the years, number of rapes by relatively young men imported into Britain from Middle Eastern countries and targeting young girls, 12, 13, 14 years old. You know, it's amazing. And again, just the contradictions. These people on the left going on and on about Epstein Island, not that it isn't a reason to be concerned, but when you have, over the years, thousands of reported rapes that have got, and the British government, they've acknowledged it, that this stuff was being covered up because they didn't want to insult or offend members of the Islamic community in Britain. There's total silence on it. Zero. Zilch. No anger. No shout-outs during acceptance awards at the Oscars. No red carpet interviews referencing it. But again, you got the DEI component there. White person is the bad guy. Non-white person is the good guy. Even if you're talking about rape. It's indisputable that some in the British government have been taking a knee to the wants and desires of the Islamic community that has been imported into Britain. I think we also at the same time may forget how viciously angry across the political spectrum the British were when Joe Biden up and pulled out in disastrous fashion out of Afghanistan. We forget that other countries like Britain were there as well, and they were not brought in on the loop on this, and they were left furious. We forget other NATO countries were there. We forget that we were not the only country that had a presence on the ground when that decision was made by Joe Biden. During the period of time, one during Parliament had declared that the people of Britain would never join the U.S. in any military action going forward because of the decision of Joe Biden, because of that betrayal. I grabbed a story from the Time. UK politicians decry Joe Biden's defense of Afghanistan pullout. Biden coming under fire from senior British politicians over his deference for withdrawing forces from Afghanistan, or defense rather, with Keir Starmer calling it a catastrophic error of judgment. A defiant U.S. president insisted on Monday that he stood squarely behind the decision to quickly pull out troops despite the swift defense by the Taliban, saying, quote, "After 20 years, I've learned the hard way that there's never a good time to withdraw U.S. forces. That's why we're still there. We were clear-eyed about that risk." Biden's claim that the U.S. and its allies gave Afghans every chance to determine their own future, but ultimately could not provide them with the will to fight for the future drew criticism from senior Tory PM, Labor, and Liberal Democrats all across the spectrum. Pressure mounted on the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to disavow comments made before a statement that he will make on Wednesday, which Parliament is when Parliament's recalled. Starmer said he was deeply concerned Biden's address did not recognize the wider consequences of the action that he has taken that would result in a looming humanitarian crisis. After receiving a briefing from the government's national security advisor, the labor leader said the White House was wrong to blame the Afghan government and security forces for the ongoing regime's collapse, adding that there was a big question the U.S. and U.K. needed to answer about why the resilience of the Taliban was so underestimated. The liberal Democrat leader, Ed Davey, said Biden, along with Johnson, had been left, quote, frozen by events and negligently unprepared. Senior conservatives also rounded on Biden. Former chief of staff to Theresa May said it was time to wake up, smell the coffee. The U.S. Regarding Democrats and, at the time, some Republicans no longer believing the U.S. should be the world's policeman, adding, the lesson for Europeans is clear. Whoever is president, the U.S. is unlikely to offer the same support that it used to in parts of the world where its vital interests are not involved. Europeans are going to have to develop the capabilities to intervene without U.S. support. That's not going to be cheap, and the EU and Britain are going to have to work out how to cooperate on this because we face the same threats. The story goes on, and it was at the time, and it wasn't only the UK, but some of the loudest voices in really swinging hard at Biden at the time, and essentially declaring that that we as a country can no longer be trusted to engage in military action because of that particular move and just the level of betrayal on a number of different fronts. What they saw is not only to the Afghan people, but to the British government and those who were serving there on the ground in Afghanistan. I think at the same time, it's pretty interesting that this is a guy that went around touting that he made NATO stronger than ever when you have our allies in Britain at the time of the withdrawal of Afghanistan talking about how they could no longer rely on the United States as a partner when it comes to these sorts of military actions. It's interesting because Joe Biden was sending that message of our European allies needed to stop wholly relying on us because of his complete disaster of a withdrawal, while Donald Trump did the same thing, but did it in a way that resulted in NATO becoming stronger because they willingly upped the ante when it came to how much financially they were putting skin into the game. So for two totally different reasons. And I'm not claiming that. I think you've got a combination of reasons here. I think that legitimately the increase of the Islamic population in the UK may have, something to do with it. But I do think that we should not forget just how openly angry across the political spectrum politicians were, people in government were in Britain, to the point that they were indicating that that was the end of future military action, at least for the foreseeable future with the United States, because you can't trust us to not just one day go, okay, we're done, and to leave everyone else, including our own allies, high and dry. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers, everyone.
Thank you. Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. We've got just a couple more days this week that we will need that heat, and then we will be back to switching that AC on. Now, if you flipped your AC on a couple days ago and you noticed popping, maybe uneven cooling throughout your home, or maybe your AC was just struggling to keep up, don't wait until it gets super duper hot to address the issue. Now is a good time to address the issue, and my go-to guys are Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. They offer residential and commercial HVAC services. They also offer an annual maintenance program, which is awesome. It's a really good way to keep your HVAC running smoothly year-round, but they also get that breakdowns do happen, which is why the Foreman team offers a 24/7 emergency service line. So whether you have a repair that needs to be addressed right away, or maybe you want to sign up for that annual maintenance program, reach out to Russell. You can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com. Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozark's first meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see widespread frost before 9 a.m., otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 48. Tonight, cloudy with a low around 40. For your Wednesday, sunny with a high near 68. And taking a look at Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 79.
Over at KSGF.com, get signed up for Lunch Bunch Godfather's Pizza in Springfield. Get signed up. If you win, then you'll join Sarah and me on a Wednesday with up to 5 additional people of your choosing. You can also register while you're over there for a family 4-pack. St. Louis Cardinals will be in town on the 23rd to take on the Springfield Cardinals, and you have a chance to win a family 4-pack to that also at ksgf.com. You'll also find at that site Nick's endorsements, Ozark's Elder Law, one of those, making it potentially as easy as one document that is set up in order to help transition family from you being here and alive on this planet to when you no longer are. Sometimes these things aren't needed to be as complicated as they are, but they do take a specialty, and they take oftentimes, people that know what they're doing. That's just a reality. So when you hear on the radio or on some sort of reel for just $199, you can download your own will and trust. That is not going to work for you. Not to mention every state's different anyhow. Everybody's situation is different. And that's why you need that customized approach and that consultation, which, because that is an obstacle for a lot of people, the consultation and the fee for that, Ozarks Elder Law, it's a courtesy. They waive the fee so that you know what it will take to make sure that you are protected, your family is protected, your assets are protected, and that government that's always trying to figure out how it is to get a little something extra out of you and your family, even during a passing, you're protected from that as well. OzarksElderLaw.com, also under Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. We're going to talk about this James Comey thing.
Oh, yes, let's do it.
I've just really decided he's a weirdo.
Oh, 100%.
What is interesting is for the longest time, there's been this cliche of J. Edgar Hoover and being sort of weird, and he liked to wear women's clothes, and he was all of this stuff that I don't know how much of it's true, how much of it isn't true. I don't know. I don't know. It really never mattered to me. But that was sort of a running gag when it came to J. Edgar Hoover. I'm really believing James Comey is, if all of that stuff about J. Edgar Hoover was true, James Comey's just as weird. We played audio some time ago of him going on and on about Taylor Swift and her songs and how much they meant to him. It was just weird. It was the sort of thing that you would find if, let's say, some inappropriately older man tried to, break into Taylor Swift's home because in his mind he believed that they were in love and that they were destined to be married. And then you would find videos that he posted after the arrest. You know what I mean?
It gave stalker vibes.
It did. Total, complete stalker vibes. He has posted, and by the way, these are things that he means for people to see. This isn't like secret recordings that, I'm so embarrassed. This was not ever meant to be seen by the public. It's the fact that he's an adult male that I think makes this weird. And his latest, he does a Substack and he posts these videos. I know I keep using the term weird, but it is weird. And here he is talking about Beyonce.
One morning I was sitting at the head of a big table in a crowded room to get briefed on a particular piece of work. The briefer started by saying the operation was codenamed Sandcastles. Now this was 2016, and you may know that Beyonce's album Lemonade had come out then with a track called Sandcastles. So I said, like the Beyonce song. Blank stares all around the FBI conference room. So I did the natural thing, I think. I sang, "We built sandcastles that washed away." Nope, nothing, dead silence. Never mind, I said, continue. Only when I got home and told my family the story did I get the reaction I was looking for.
Which I don't know what that would be. But can you imagine?
Why did he feel the need to post that?
There's weird and then there's weird. So you're the director of the FBI and you're sitting down and you're being briefed on what is going on and like, he's like, Beyonce, and by his own acknowledgement, it was just uncomfortable silence. Yet that's because that's weird. That's really, really, really weird. The other part of it is, he said when he got home and he relayed the story, he got from his family the reaction that he was looking for. What do you think he was looking for?
I don't know.
To be told how hip and cool he was? Genuinely, I can't imagine it was to be told, you're a great singer. It wouldn't have been that. Let's realistically think about this. Now, we know the tone of when he says, I got home, I got the reaction I was looking for. Clearly, it was something positive. I mean, obviously, he wanted affirmation. He comes home after being humiliated, singing lyrics from a Beyonce song to an uncomfortable room of people wondering who the hell is in charge of this FBI right now. This is the guy trying to, run a coup against the president of the United States. He comes home, he gets the affirmation he's looking for. But what did that affirmation look like? Was it you're so hip and cool and relevant because you know who Beyonce? Oh, we're so impressed. Oh, they just don't understand how cool you are. The combination of that and the Taylor Swift stuff makes me believe that it's like he's stuck in his teens or maybe early 20s and he's thinking that he is, if there were some spring break trip that were people in their late teens and early 20s, in his mind, he would fit in perfectly with them. He would be just one of the crew at his age today. I think there's a level of delusion there. What a weirdo. And this is the guy that particularly post 9/11, we were told was the one normal person in Washington, the one person that was unaffected by politics, the one stoic individual who always knew where North was and never strayed from it. There was this laid upon him, this characteristic of just. What is the word? I mean, not just this honorable person, but this just above it all. But he's weird. How did people not know? Did they know this, but they didn't want to admit it? I would love for somebody to eventually write a book and like, okay, you started to see some of the weird stuff. You have no idea. It even makes some of the shell stuff that he did with the seashells and the assassination reference to Donald Trump and then claiming, oh, I thought it was I don't even know what to think of some of that stuff now, given how bizarre he seems to be. And what a weirdo. That guy was the head of the FBI. I tell you something else that I think is going to make the rounds today, if it hasn't already. What time is it? All right, we're going to get traffic. Jerry O'Connell sat down with Bill Maher on his podcast. Now, Bill Maher, he's got two media venues that he utilizes. One of them is Real Time with Bill Maher. That is on HBO. It's a weekly show, and he's got the monologue, and then he sits down, does an interview with someone, and then has a panelist sort of discussion. And he gets some people from the right, people from the left. It's about current event stuff. Then he has his podcast, and it's called Club Random, and it really is just talking about random stuff. It's appropriately named, and he's usually drinking some alcohol, smoking a joint sometimes while he's doing the show. It's all very casual, as it's meant to be. I actually like it. I think that I like listening to it. It isn't always about politics, but a lot of times it is. And he had Jerry O'Connell on, and Jerry O'Connell was relaying a story, and I think this just got posted yesterday, about his wife and his daughter's reaction to Kamala Harris losing the election. And not their reaction to that so much, but their reaction to him and some of the comments he made as the election results were coming in. I want to share that. Play it coming up next. Pyramid Roofing Company text line 447-KSGF. Jerry O'Connell was on Bill Maher's Club Random and talked about a number of different things, as oftentimes spoken of on Club Random. And Jerry O'Connell, if you're not familiar with him, he's an actor. His first real acting gig was Stand By Me, the Stephen King movie. And he was the really fat kid. And he grew up to not be a fat guy, but relatively decent looking guy, sort of the not goofy guy charm, and not quite like that, but just all around swell kind of guy look to him. He's done a number of different TV series. I recall him from Crossing Jordan. I think the most recent thing I actually saw him was Piranha 3D, of all the different horrible movies in which there was a lake and these genetically mutated piranhas were going around eviscerating people over spring break, and he was in. I think Elizabeth Shue was in that, as well as a couple of other. Was Christopher Lloyd in that? I want to say Christopher Lloyd may have been in. It was a weird hodgepodge of people, but he's a well-known actor. He's very successful. He's also married to Rebecca Romijn, who was an actress and a model. She was Mystique in some of the X-Men movie. She was Rebecca Romijn Stamos. She had been married to John Stamos, and John Stamos, more of the smoldering James Dean kind of guy, to the more of the goofy Jerry O'Connell. I think a lot of people kind of wondered how that all worked out, but they've been together for some time and they have some daughters together, and they're talking. He's talking on the most recent episode of Club Random with Bill Maher about the night of the election results and the way that his wife and children reacted to his reaction.
I said something along the lines of there was no planning. This is what they get. There should have been a primary. I said something along those lines, I was just spitballing ideas it was a shock, My wife and daughters, without saying anything, became physical with me. They were filled with rage.
Now, to what degree they got physical? Were they throwing things at him? Were they punching him, swinging at him? He didn't elaborate too much. Now, Bill Maher would sort of almost to himself say, I could never live like that. And I think a lot of people couldn't. A lot of men could not. This does go back to what we just continue to see, this common theme, particularly amongst white liberal women, is the level of insanity. There is something wrong with these people. We live in this contradictory culture where we tell ourselves we need to focus on mental illnesses, yet some of the most observable and common mental illnesses that we see on a daily basis, we pretend as if it's perfectly normal. The Trump derangement syndrome, if you want to call it, people on the left who suffer from it will tell you that it's perfectly normal. Well, people with mental illnesses often believe that they are fine, that they aren't the one who is the problem. But this is, and I'm not saying it because of political reasons. You could take the politics out of it. Anytime someone is so obsessed with someone else that they can turn violent against their own family, that they, blame that other person for absolutely everything. I oftentimes think of it in terms of, a breakup and the one half of the breakup just cannot let go of that person, and they're always going on about them, and everything that bad happens, they blame on that individual. Anytime any subject matter comes up, they start trashing on this individual, and you're like, you need some help. You guys, you need help. This is not healthy. This obsession that you have with this person in your life, you are choosing to be hyper-focused on this individual. You are choosing to seek out reasons to hate this person, whether it's going on social media to find out what's the latest that he's done. It's like going and looking at your ex's postings on social media, on Instagram, on the reels, and they're with the new boyfriend or girlfriend, and they're out there doing these things, and it just you're going there to get angry, and that's not healthy. There is something wrong, and we see that on full display. What Jerry O'Connell is talking about there, where his wife and his own daughters become physically violent with him. And he wasn't a Trump supporter, by the way. He was just as frustrated as they were. He hates Trump. He wanted Kamala Harris to win. He was frustrated because of the way that Kamala Harris's campaign was run and the fact that Democrats overturned the election of Joe Biden in the selection process. And he noted, maybe they should have done a primary. All of these intellectual thoughts, these brain-powered observations, and clearly it wasn't a pro-Trump state, but they still, because it was a criticism of Donald Trump's opponent, his own family gets physical against him. And to have such a wide spread, I don't know in my lifetime there has ever been such a widespread observable mental illness. To me, it's a mental illness, a mental issue. Has been so palatable, so transcending across the landscape, yet we're supposed to pretend it's perfectly normal behavior. It is a reflection of a normal person's reaction to the horrors that Donald Trump is. And it makes you realize, even when it comes to diagnosing, observing, fixing people with mental illnesses, that the left has infiltrated that as well, where they utilize people with mental issues for their own political purposes, turning them against Trump, getting them to get sex change operations, convincing them they're actually boys in girls' bodies, girls in boys' bodies, and for a culture that seemingly presents itself as more concerned than ever about helping people with mental issues, yet our approach to some of the most profound in our culture, we pretend as if it's perfectly normal. That is not normal. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. Fans were shocked yesterday when photos of Hollywood's Dolby Theater hit social media showing how Hollywood's A-list celebrities who constantly cry about climate change and environmental issues left the theater looking like a pigsty. Did you see any of these photos?
No,
Yeah, let's just be honest. They left it the way that people on the left always leave a room. I mean, have you seen the difference between an event in which you have a bunch of conservative Christian pro-lifers when they leave versus having a bunch of left-wing environmentalists that are there for Earth Day leave it? They leave it. There was, I think it was during the Obama administration. There was some left-wing environmentalists protesting a pipeline deal, and they completely trashed just trashed it. But it does make sense when you understand the left's approach to things and even government. What is it? They're always, all these wonderful things need to be done. But who does it? See, they want someone else to do it. That's the great trick of their so-called compassion and caring, is it's shoveling it off to someone else to do. The government should just do it. Government does it. Government does it. And because they're uber wealthy, they can afford to take that position. Well, just have somebody else do it. And when it comes to wealthy liberal celebrities, their lifestyle encourages that perspective because they're surrounded by people who want to win favor with them. And so they'll be at their ever beck and call, and they just toss something to the ground, and their assistant will pick it up very quickly and toss it away for them. And it also helps inform us why it is that they think things can so easily and magically just fix themselves, because in their world, that's what happens. And so why can't government just do it? Why government just eliminate the poor and eliminate this and that and fix these things? And the left, even though your average person on the left doesn't have the wealth to necessarily live that particular lifestyle, they still take that approach. And it's a virtue signaling of such. And it's somebody else's problem. Let someone else take care of it. There are people who do this, and so it shouldn't surprise us when they leave a mess behind. They do everywhere they go. Springfield's Talk 104.1, and welcome to Hour 3. My name is Nick Reed. KSGF.com. You can stream us there, listen to podcasts there, get signed up for Lunch Bunch, Godfather's Pizza, the Springfield location, and also win a family 4-pack. Register to do that for the upcoming St. Louis Cardinals taking on Springfield Cardinals March 23rd. All that while you're there. I finally made it. I have a review on HunterHardscapes.com.
Oh, look at you.
Made it. That's how I know I made it. Right there. It says Nicholas Reed. I gave 5 stars. But I want to read to you Laura Fleetwood, what she posted about her experience, because you all know about my experience. Now, my review, I did not, it was like a few weeks ago, I actually did the review. I just didn't think about it on Google. I've never done Google reviews, and I just started doing them. I'm
going to go and see who else you've reviewed.
Yeah, I think maybe just 2 other people, maybe 1. And here's why I actually started to do it, was because I would oftentimes get asked, hey, will you leave a Google review? Well, I didn't have a Google account thing to log into because you had to, and so I couldn't do it. And I was like, I don't want to sign up and for whatever, it just, but I finally felt bad because people would ask me to leave a review. People I thought did a really, really great job. In fact, I need to leave one for the guy who helped out with the girl child's 17th birthday party at Andy B's. He was absolutely incredible. I kept his card. But I don't think I had an account set up yet to where I had never logged into it or something. I don't know. I'm making it sound like it's much more difficult than it probably is, but I just hadn't done it until recently. And so, I did the one. So it'll say at HunterHardscapes.com March 3rd, 2026, even though it's been a year just about since we had our project done. Laura posting hers November of this past year saying, where do I start? Daniel Hunter and his crew did a big project for us in our backyard this fall, went way beyond our expectations. The job started out with thoughtful consultations with Daniel that included drawings of our plans. He patiently worked with us and helped us create a beautiful new outdoor living area using materials that reflected our vision for our backyard within our budget. His crew worked 4 10-hour days, showing up promptly 7 a.m., sometimes even earlier every day. They were friendly and answered all our questions, shared enthusiasm in their work, and our excitement in what was being created. The whole project was completed, start to finish, around 3 weeks, which was exactly what we expected according to the drawings. The last day, they methodically finished off the project by making sure every little detail was perfect. Highly recommend using Hunter Hardscapes and landscaping. Now, I almost was laughing out loud when she talked about they were friendly and, shared enthusiasm in their work and our excitement in what was being created, because we talked about that. We're like, don't they seem like really happy to be doing this job? I remember my wife and I we were like, why are they so happy? I mean, this is something they do all of the time. We came to the conclusion that they were genuinely excited about what they knew they were creating for us, that it really is just absolute top of the line, best that you're going to get. And they know that. I think that they anticipate exceeding expectations, and they're pleased with that. And so when she was writing about how they were actually enthusiastic about it, I thought a lot of people will read that and think, oh, come on, don't oversell this, but it's 100% true. At least it was with our experience. HunterHardscapes.com. You can find them under Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. You were referencing during the intro of the show Gavin Newsom and playing up his dyslexia again.
Oh, yes.
Now, some of this is in response to Donald Trump talking about why Gavin Newsom should never be president. And he noted that Gavin Newsom has admitted that he has learning disabilities. And this has come in a combination of what happened. Gavin Newsom, he throws out there these comments because in his mind, he's being endearing and humble by telling, for example, that black audience in Atlanta that he is not that smart, and what was it? He said, "I'm just as." What was the term? Did he say I'm just, or I'm no smarter than you, or something?
Something like that.
Something, and he's like, I can't read very well, and my SAT score was really low, and so this is how he relates. He tries to play the humble card and pretend that he's not that intelligent. Now, it depends on the audience that he's speaking to. He's had similar conversations with wide audiences in which he talked about reading books and how quickly he was able to read them because they were engaging. When he talks to black people, he's like, I can't hardly read, and I'm no smarter than you guys are. And so the race component's been noted there. But this is something that Gavin Newsom has talked about. Well, then when he gets made fun of for it, or it gets pointed out that there's a little bit of a racism component here because it's the black audience that he says that he's got learning disabilities in front of, while white audiences he doesn't, he all of a sudden says you're attacking him for having dyslexia. Even when he's not even talking about having dyslexia, or it's not relevant. For example, Ted Cruz during a podcast noted that Gavin Newsom was historically illiterate, responding to something that Newsom was talking about in which he was displaying his historical ignorance. And so Ted Cruz referred to him as being historically illiterate. What was his response? Don't make fun of me for having dyslexia. And then he ropes in kids with dyslexia by saying, kids, don't let them bully you thinking that having dyslexia, like, what? You're the one who keeps bringing this up. You draw this attention by pretending as if you're an idiot, claiming you're not that smart, and then when somebody mentions it, you say, how dare you attack me for being dyslexic? You ready for this headline?
Yes.
Because Trump referencing all this and saying Gavin Newsom's running around talking about being having disabilities, mental disabilities or whatever. Headline, this is a CNN story on KY3. Trump says Gavin Newsom shouldn't be president because he's dyslexic. Not exactly. Now, I'll give them credit. They did quote Trump, and he does not say that in the quote. They quote Trump as saying, that's how crazy it's gotten with a low IQ person, because Gavin Newsom has admitted he has learning disabilities. Honestly, I'm all for people with learning disabilities, but not for president. I think the president should not have learning disabilities, okay? And I know it's highly controversial to say such a horrible thing. By the way, is that really that horrible? I mean, is it? Of course, it depends on what the disability is, but that aside. So he's not talking about dyslexia there. He's talking about all of the rhetoric Gavin Newsom has used, downplaying his intelligence, which, again, he's just pandering. And so Trump is using that pandering. But for then KY3 to claim that Trump says Gavin Newsom shouldn't be president because he's dyslexic, come on. I mean, jeez. Oh, what we have come to expect. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair of the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see widespread frost before 9 a.m., otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 48. Tonight, cloudy skies with a low around 40. For your Wednesday, sunny with a high near 68. And for Thursday, sunny with a high near 79.
I actually think that could be if you had straight up, legitimate, intellectual approach to the conversation, I think that's an interesting topic. Are you comfortable somebody with a learning disability being president of the United States? And part of the reason that it could be an interesting discussion is because what constitutes a learning disability no longer anyhow? We sort of slap that label on things that it wasn't slapped upon generations ago, and so that has changed so much. I think some people who instinctively say no because that's discrimination, if they were going in for heart surgery and they were told, okay, hey, we got a new program going here. And one of our heart surgeons, top of his class, and just aces across the board. The other one has a learning disability. Now, for anti-discrimination purposes, we can't tell you what that learning disability is. Do you have a choice between the two heart surgeons? I think most people would probably say, well, and again, some of it is just because of the changing definition of what a learning disability is. But I think the most deplorable thing about Gavin Newsom being condescending and in this weird way of trying to be humble and talking about, I'm not really that smart. And then when you criticize him for pandering, he says, how dare you attack me for being dyslexic, is when he brings the kids into it. And that's, I think I've got, what did I just do with that story? See, Gavin Newsom posted, following Trump, let's see. So here's what Gavin Newsom then posted. To every kid with a learning disability, don't let anyone, not even the president of the United States, bully you. Dyslexia isn't a weakness. It's like, come on. You're really going to drag kid. It's just so gross. And it's so Gavin Newsom. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. I want to read a review for my friends over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Kara wrote, Josh was great to work with. He was quick to respond, super helpful, and he went above and beyond to answer any questions that we had. Our roof looks great, and the crew members were friendly, efficient, and respectful of our property. We couldn't have asked for a better experience and would recommend them 100%. And that's what you get with the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, we've had some pretty rough storms roll through the listening area over the last couple of weeks. So if you have storm damage, or maybe you just want a checkup on your roof, reach out to Josh. They offer free roof inspections, and they'll be honest about the work that needs to be done, whether it's time for a whole new roof or maybe just a simple roof repair. So if it is time to have the Pyramid team out to your home, reach out to Josh and schedule that free roof inspection today. You can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Yesterday, I find this just to be very funny. Trump made the comment that he had spoken to a past president about what we're doing in regards to Iran. And the past president, former president, confided in him, or I guess didn't confide, but told him, yeah, I wish I had done that. Now, of course, the press immediately, they start contacting every past president or their gatekeepers to find out, to get comment on it, because they want to be able to say Trump's just making this up, because they want to weaken, in the eyes of the enemy, the United States as best as possible. Donald Trump was asked, so who are you talking about? And here's the exchange regarding that question.
I just want to ask you about something very interesting you said twice today. You talked to another former president of the United. Was it George W. Bush?
No.
Was it Bill Clinton?
I don't want to say. I don't want to say. Because a member of Parliament, have Trump derangement syndrome, but it's somebody that happens to like me, and I like that person who's a smart person. But that person said, I wish I did it. Okay, but I don't want to get into who.
Okay.
I don't want to get him into trouble. Maybe, hey, you know what? Yeah, I think you probably know.
When I saw that he first made the comment before this round of questioning, I was trying to figure out, all right, if this was said or if something sort of in the ballpark arena was said, who would I guess it to be? And Clinton is who I would have guessed. I mean, Biden, obviously, there's no point even talking to him, nor would he. I think Obama's too elitist, and I just don't know that he would even have a conversation with Trump about this stuff. I think that George Bush also probably has no interest in talking with Clinton. Is a guy that I think Clinton is like Trump in the sense he really does enjoy having conversations with all sorts of different people, including people that don't like him or that he may not, quote, like, that he doesn't get along with. They both seem to share that character trait. It's a character trait that oftentimes results in people that don't like the individual, but when they meet them, somehow find themselves realizing, well, as a person, this guy isn't nearly as bad as I thought he was going to be. I mean, Bill Maher going to dinner at the White House and his recognition of that afterwards is a perfect example of it. And Trump obviously has this effect on people. I mean, it's undeniable. You see it all the time. And Clinton does as well. Now, the personalities are very different. Clinton is sort of the smooth, compassionate, I feel your pain, whereas Donald Trump is more brash. And honestly, it's the cultural difference, I would argue, between somebody that's born and raised in New Jersey, New York, versus somebody from the South, an Arkansas guy. Just the way that you deal with people and talk with people. But they ultimately enjoy, I believe, engaging with and talking with people that normally would not like them. And I think some of it's because they like the fact that those people end up liking them. And given there aren't that many options of past presidents that Trump would have this sort of conversation with, I wouldn't be surprised if Clinton and Trump did have conversations periodically. It just would not surprise me. Of course, one could argue that he gave it away when asked, who was he asked first? Was it Bush? And he said no. Mm-hmm. Was it Clinton? I'm not going to say. Okay. All right. Keep that one hidden real closely. So now, of course, there's going to be an effort to get a spokesperson from Clinton to acknowledge that or to deny it. I mean, that's what they want. They want to be able to accuse Trump of lying so that they can portray this as an effort to make it look as if things are going better with the war against Iran than they actually are. Again, their number one goal is to really give aid and comfort to the opposition through their reporting and to downplay any potential real success as an outcome from this thing. So that's what they're going to attempt to do. Wonder if, I don't know. And who knows? Maybe Clinton would just come out and be like, yeah, I said that. And again, I think oftentimes Trump will take what is supposed to be a dance around statement of sorts, and he will clarify it to get closer to the point. So it could be Bill Clinton talking about how if when he were president, some circumstances had been different, he would like to have thought that he would have done the same thing. And Trump sees that as Clinton essentially, without coming out and saying it, saying, I wish I had been able to do this, and then reduces it down to, yeah, one of the former presidents told me he wished he had done this instead. I could see it potentially being something like this, though it may not be an exact quote. I suspect that probably Bill Clinton, in one fashion or another, expressed his understanding of why Trump is doing what he's doing. And in certain circumstances, if he had been president, he would have done the same thing, had the circumstances been what they are today. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by J&S Automotive. Today we'll see widespread frost before 9 a.m., otherwise mostly cloudy with a high near 48. Tonight, cloudy with a low near 40. For your Wednesday, sunny with a high near 68. And for Thursday, sunny skies with a high near 79.
New York City's Democrats have come up with a novel idea for stopping the rash of shoplifting occurring in the city. Punish the people being stolen from. Well, of course. This is absolutely perfect in socialist New York City. Democrat New York City Council members introduced a measure that would penalize grocery stores for failing to have enough employees monitor self-checkout lines, essentially blaming them if someone steals from their stores, according to the New York Post. Left-leaning members of the New York City Council are considering bizarre new legislation that aims to curb retail theft by penalizing customers and business owners rather than criminals. Now, do we think this will increase or decrease the likelihood that people will steal? New York City supermarkets and pharmacies would be forced to impose a 15-item limit. By the way, this is fascism. When in an economic from an economic perspective, fascism is a government that says, oh yeah, you can own your own private business, but we're going to tell you how it gets run. We're going to tell you how many employees to have, what products to sell, how you run your business. That's the fascism perspective. So all of these left-wingers that run around calling Trump a fascist because they don't even know what the term actually means. Literally, if you've ever seen any of these videos in which people call Trump a fascist and then they're asked to define fascism, they can't. They just say, well, Donald Trump. These economic policies, the way that the left encourages, government to deal with businesses, that is fascism. That's what this is. New York City supermarkets and pharmacies would be forced to impose a 15-item limit for customers using self-checkout lines and have at least one employee assigned to every 3 of those lines or face daily fines of at least $100. So they're running the business. If you happen to be one of these criminals who go into stores, sometimes brazenly and casually, sometimes in more of a bum rush, and fill pillowcases with items and storm out, in what way will supermarkets and pharmacies enforcing a 15-item limit for customers at self-checkout lines stop you from doing that? As usual, it's the demonstration of people who are in positions of power that have absolutely no concept of human behavior, or they don't care. Councilwoman Amanda Ferraris, who is a Democrat from the Bronx, introduced the legislation on Tuesday, saying we've seen the consequences of removing workers from these spaces, increased retail theft, less oversight, fewer protection for both workers and customers, and generally decreased safety. The bill is about protecting good jobs, supporting workers on the front lines, and creating a more secure shopping environment for New Yorkers. Contending the 15-item limit is to maintain safety, accountability, fairness in the checkout process. Let me tell you what this is actually going to do. It is the same thing that happens every time there is any sort of law that is passed or repealed that removes the responsibility of a crime from the actual criminal. It increases crime. And when you increase crime, that makes the work environment not safer, but more dangerous. You are inviting criminals to commit crimes. And all you're going to do is force more employees to have to deal with it, which of course will be stand by and do nothing. Because if we've seen anything in New York City, it is that the government there goes after people who act as good Samaritans and try to stop, as citizens, crimes from being committed. They throw the full force of the law at that person. So in order to, every business is going to protect themselves, as this is common policy, and they're going to make sure that all of these new employees, if they're forced to hire them because of this fascist legislation in New York City, there will be a policy that if somebody comes in and somebody is shoplifting, you don't do anything. Let them do it. And some of that's for protection, because if an employee is instructed to or even allowed to try and stop a criminal from shoplifting and they are harmed in the process of doing so, then they can turn around and sue the business. This is why, as frustrating as it is to watch so many of these businesses have policies that invite criminals to shoplift, I understand why they do it. Because if they don't force them to not interfere, and they do interfere and get harmed, then the business is on the hook for it. And this approach, of course, isn't any better. The legislators' rollout comes on the heels of the council's far-left faction trying to drum up support for a separate bill backed by Mamdani to increase the city's hourly minimum wage from $17 to $30 an hour. A plan business leaders warn would be a costly disaster for employees. Well, of course it would. This is why socialism fails. It is because of this insanity. Now, as I've noted, the benefit that socialists like Mamdani have is they are that poison of socialism and fascism is in a pool of largely free market systems that they can suck off of. You see, if you're a country like Venezuela and you implement socialism and you don't really have a massive lifeline of revenue coming in to keep you off life support, you eventually collapse on yourself, as occurred in Venezuela, where you have people eating dogs and, carrying around money in wheelbarrows becomes virtually worthless. If you're in New York City, what do? What is he already doing? Demanding that Hochul, as governor, take money from everyone who lives throughout the entire state in order to fund what he wants to do in New York City. And so, as bad as the results of these socialist policies will be, they won't be a real true example of what socialism does, because they will be able to rely on lifelines coming outside of the little socialist utopia. Which in itself, and this is how screwy their brains are. When you will point to the disasters of socialism, they will blame the non-socialist system outside of the New York City government for not giving them enough money. We hear this quite often when it comes to Cuba and the failed state of socialism and communism there. Well, the only reason that they're a poverty-stricken country is because the United States, has an embargo and they lock down the economic ability of the Cuban people. Well, why do you need the United States? You can't, on one hand, argue that your pathway of governing is the great utopia, but then claim that, well, we can't do it unless the country that is a free market system country is there to give us a financial lifeline. But they do. When their policies fail, it's always the policies of the successful, or it's the fact that the successful aren't bailing out their failed policies that is the reason for their policies failing. Coming up, this is another New York City story. We would love for people to just understand and recognize the reality of these policies. New York City, last year, spent roughly $81,000 per person on homeless services in the city. That is roughly the average annual income of an American. And what has it done? Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Springfield Livestock Marketing Center came across this great review from Deb. Deb wrote, beautiful facility. We attended the horse auction. There is always a huge selection of tack beforehand. It's actually amazing how much tack that is sold. We have also purchased a fantastic horse for our granddaughter there. Lucky granddaughter. He is now a big part of our family. We have only had fabulous experiences there. And honestly, the buying experience that I had was pretty similar to Deb's. Only thing is I didn't buy a horse. I got a donkey named Mr. Pickles. But I've been to other facilities, and the Springfield Livestock Marketing Center, it really stands out. It's clean. They have lots of seating, and the staff, they are always very knowledgeable and friendly. Now, if you are interested in their horse sale, it's typically held on the last Friday of the month, and it starts around 5 p.m. So make sure to mark your calendar for March 27th because that is when the next horse sale will be. To check out other upcoming sales, visit their website, springfieldlivestock.com. And of course, you can find all of the contact information for Springfield Livestock under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at KSGF.com.
I was watching on the monitor, CNN. We've got a number of different news feeds that come in here, and during the break, and they had a side-by-side, and it was the number of secretaries of state that eventually became president versus the number of vice presidents that eventually became, and it was 6 versus 6. I wonder what they're getting at here. I mean, watching the media, listen, I know it isn't irrelevant that Marco Rubio has run for president before and that he is in the spotlight, and his approval rating is at 81%, according to some of the latest polling, which is very high. And then there's J.D. Vance, and while he hasn't run for president, as vice president, he is someone that is clearly seen as, you know, the next candidate for the presidency in the general election. I say clearly seen. A lot of people just view it that way by virtue of the fact that he's vice president. But the media does consistently try to drive wedges throughout this administration. And it's humorous to watch CNN put up this, well, look at this. Oh, how many former secretaries of state have eventually become president? How many vice presidents? Oh, it's 6 and 6 here. And well, this is very interesting stuff here. I wonder what this means between Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. It's a tie. New York City spent roughly $81,000 per person on homeless services last year, amounting to a whopping $368 million in total. A shocking new state report found. Well, this is not shocking to me. But you just think about that for a moment. Over $81,000 per homeless person. What did they get? Spending on the city's Department of Homeland Services Street Homeless Solutions Division more than tripled over the last 6 years, going from $102 million in 2019, which was about $28,000 per homeless person, according to the report from the state comptroller's office, skyrocketing up to $81,000. The cost per person was roughly equivalent to the city's median household income as of the 2024 U.S. Census, which is $81,228 annually. Homeless people constitute those living regularly on the streets compared to those who are in some kind of affordable housing or long-term shelter system. So this doesn't even cover the people that are actually in shelters or some sort of these are the people that are on the streets, urine soaked, with needles out their arms, screaming at the sky half the time. I mean, this is when you think of worst case scenario homeless person. That's what we're talking about here. What is that $81,000 going towards? And what a, though not surprising, reflection of a Democrat-run city. But to have a city in this country in which you are given as government the same amount of money that on average in this country is an actual annual salary that, can potentially afford an actual home and a vehicle and food and vacations, and yet you can't even get a person off the street with that much money? You want to talk about a failure? Added bonus, New York City's homeless population increased by 26% over the same period of time. So not only did it not diminish the number of homeless, it actually increased it. This is this East Coast, left coast thing. We've got a war going on between New York City and Gavin Newsom's California in terms of which coast is the coast of the most expensive yet unfulfilled promises. Gavin Newsom, since he was on, I think it was just a board in San Francisco or somewhere in California, and he would eventually become, I think it's mayor of San Francisco, and he's worked his way up. All along the way, he's gone on and on and on about how he's going to solve the homeless problem. This has been going on for years and years and years and years. And just like in New York City, out there in California, they have skyrocketed the amount of dollars to get rid of homelessness, yet the amount of homeless people has skyrocketed. It gets to the point for a lot of Americans, you realize there is no hope for some of these voters. You don't care about the homeless. You don't care about the streets being safe places to walk. Because it doesn't matter how often you get ripped off and you get lied to, and what you're told is going to happen as a result, the opposite happens. And they just support the same people over and over again. And this really, if you understand human behavior, is very clear. The more money you offer homeless people in terms of benefits or whatever it is, the more homeless people you're going to get. This is the reality that people who run cities in particular refuse to acknowledge. They just refuse to acknowledge it. Their answer is always the same. We need to spend more on it. And every time the result is more homeless people. Every time. Do you know why? It's the same reason panhandlers stand at busy intersections, because that's where the money is. They're not dumb. They know what they're doing. The reason that they're at major intersections instead of, standing at some corner in the middle of a neighborhood is because the areas that are higher traffic give them more money. They have more money for going to those areas, and so that is why they're drawn. The reason that cities that give more money and that brag about, we're going to do that, we're going to build this housing here, and we're going to do this, the reason you see an increase in homelessness is because when you offer up free stuff, people who live off of free stuff will come. Build it and they will come. It's the field of dreams of homelessness. After the city of Springfield finally passed an ordinance that wasn't directed at the homeless, but for pedestrian safety purposes, banning people from lingering around intersections, and there was some enforcement of it, it did not take long before people in Joplin were on social media asking, where have all of these panhandlers come from? See, these folks communicate, they network, they talk about where it is that you have a greater likelihood of where you're going to get less harassed, what communities make it more comfortable to be homeless, and they go to those places. And people that get in charge and that have access to your money, they just refuse to acknowledge that reality. Refuse to do it. And instead say, we need more of your money, which in turn makes the problem worse. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Need a home loan? Plenty of places for that. You want a great home loan? I want a great homeloan.com. Now, oftentimes a website is impersonal and you aren't really, quote, assigned anyone. You're just dealing with someone that may not even be in this country. Well, it's different with iwantagreathomeloan.com. In fact, when you go to the site, you look in the upper left-hand corner, Alex Carricker, his cell phone number. Anthony Carricker, his cell phone number, right next to their names. It's their cell phone. You can call them 7 days a week. Now, of course, obviously, they're doing something with the family or sitting in church or helping someone else. They may not be able to answer at the time, but you don't have to wait until 9 to 5 Monday through Friday in order to hear back from them. That's the level of personal service you get for your home loan, your refinancing, even your reverse mortgage needs at iwantagreathomeloan.com, because you do. The Obama Presidential Center has put out a call for people to work for free at its Chicago location when it opens later this year, though Valerie Jarrett, the CEO, is going to get almost $750,000 salary, $740,000. They need anywhere from 75 to 100 people that will work without being paid. So the party that goes on and on about demanding private businesses pay so-called living wages is doing an all-call for people to work for free under Valerie Jarrett's $740,000 salary. Glenn Beck's next. I'm